Because if you don't get a job, you get depressed, and then you will not be fine. So, simply, what is mental health? Again, privileged to have students of mental health here, so we are not going into the details. And the most important aspect of this discussion, really, is to remind ourselves that we are human first. And if we are human, we have a brain. And we have a brain, the brain can malfunction in one way or the other, isn't it? You know, people imagine that mental health issues are all those people in an alley. And the most important reason why we are going to go through these slides, probably some you may even have seen, because I hardly change the slides, because it's the same thing. And sometimes we forget, and we imagine it's about those people. But we've seen most recently that all of us are at risk. We can be affected. And it's very important, the same way you look at yourself in the mirror and check whether you are dressed well, and check whether your hair is looking fine, you also must remind yourself to keep checking how you feel, how you are interacting with people, how much you feel your worth. You know, those very small things that define mental health. And I'm saying this because we've been culturalized to imagine that mental illness is about the madman walking in town, which is really not the truth. The truth is, all of us can be affected in terms of how we feel about ourselves, how we relate with people, how we deal with the challenges in life. And sometimes we wait until it's too late. By the time someone is wearing 20 clothes, or talking to themselves, or attempting suicide, is a bit too late. And we need to normalize checking continuously on how we feel. I believe by the time I'm done, you have looked at what the definition is, because I know all of you can read to the person at the back. And it's good to check, even as we talk, how do you feel about your wellness today? How do you feel about your own worth? If you ask that question today, do you feel you're worth anything? Do you feel like you have some dignity? How are you managing with the current challenges? Because there are challenges. For us, maybe it's how to deal with the kids today. I thought there was someone who was going to take care of my children. Then at 9:30, when I was meant to be leaving, I realized I have to deal with my kids. You know, that's a challenge, isn't it? But I was not going to come, to refuse to come. I was going to come with my kids, and they told me they have had fun, even seen the river. You see, that's mental wellness, isn't it? So I didn't get depressed. I didn't have to look for anyone to take care of them. You were able to adapt very quickly. How are your relationships? Are you relating with anyone? And I'm not talking about boy child. You need daktari hapo hapa down here maybe. But us is your mother, your classmates. Did you know that if you're continuously struggling with your relationship, it's possible that you're not mentally healthy? So we need to expand our understanding of mental health and remember that all of us have aspects of mental health issues, but we don't have mental illness. But you know, I hear this strange statement that people say that all of us are mad. It's only the degree that varies. That's not true. They say we are not all diabetic, but we have a mind and it can be affected, and we continuously need to be interested in taking care of it. And then if that, what was there is the mental wellness, what is mental illness? And again, simply put, without repeating the psychiatry class, we are thinking about how you view perception, how you view the world. We are talking about how you believe. Are your belief systems in line with what is expected in the current situation? How is your thought process? Are you thinking as would be expected? Because if you're always thinking people are attacking you, people don't like you, probably that your thought process is abnormal, isn't it? It doesn't have to be people following you per se, but even as you sit in that class, you say, all teachers don't like me. That's a negative thought process, isn't it? You know, I know we are taught in the mental health class to think about the delusions and the preoccupations, but there are many people who have some in the spectrum of wellness, bordering towards unwellness, because they have very negative view of themselves. They believe everyone is following them, and that might be an issue. Mood. Again, something that's assumed. How have you been feeling most recently? And I always insist that your mood can't be flat. If it was, actually that might be illness. If you remember, because when we go through the class on schizophrenia, we say if there's flattening of affect, so you're not able to express your emotions, actually that's disease. We expect that you'll be happy sometimes. We also expect that you'll be sad sometimes. But if you notice that you're continuously sad, even when the circumstances, for example, I believe this is a happy environment. Tumekula kuku na mato. Sio ni vitu mzuri. Like if you're feeling sad now, after the mato, maybe we need to have a seat at the corner somewhere, because I imagine that, especially in this ambience, the river is flowing and it sounds nice, but you're feeling sad. Now, that is unusual, isn't it? And we need to check in. Personalities again, and sometimes we ignore this aspect. Of course, there are the severe issues, but again, we also need to be checking on, are there traits that we have been carrying that border on unwellness? People who can't make decisions, for example, did you know, like dependent personality disorder, they can't make decisions. You need to keep consulting. And it's not bad to know that you have such traits. The important thing is to know that there's something you can do so that it doesn't affect you, isn't it? So very important that we keep checking. And this discussion today is not for our patients in Kenya Ward or in Nyayo Ward or wherever it is for us, ourselves, isn't it? As you see, especially as healthcare workers, unfortunately we are trained to think, you know, when Dr. Mate talks about fractures, probably some of us will never have fracture. God will take care of us, isn't it? But for mental health issues, most of us will be affected by an aspect of it, isn't it? So we need to keep checking. So that even if you don't get those diseases they talk about out there, most likely there's an emotional, there's a perception, there's a relationship, there's a stress issue that will affect you. So it's relevant to all of us, isn't it? So usikae hapa ukiimaginingi na huyo mgonjwa alikuwa na nini, no. Check, mimi niko aje, friend yangu, ama someone who is close to you. Because that's what makes it relevant. And I like talking about stress and mental illness, especially because it's a big confusion. Many times I've interacted with people, young or old, and people say, I don't have a mental health problem, I am stressed. And people don't seem to define the boundary between stress and mental unwellness, and we need to be clear when it's just stress and when it's mental illness and attention is needed. And I always think of us as matter, if you remember that physics class. And because your matter, life events stretch you or put weight on you. And naturally, according to the laws of physics, you react, isn't it? And you're able to withstand so much. But most important to remember that even the strongest metal, I don't know whether it was steel Migani, strongest physics when Mlimaliza recently. If you think about all the materials, there's glass, there's strong metal like steel, and in between the others, maybe plastic or something, isn't it? This is the truth. We are also made of different materials. And some of what has defined what material we are made of is out of our control. It's dependent on your genetics, it's dependent on how you were raised, whether your mother was present or not. And we sort of need to understand that because of those things that define the materials that we are, then different pulls or pressure, if you remember that class, affect us differently. And we need to continuously be alive to that fact. And to remember that for all of us, you can withstand so much. But beyond a certain point, even for the strongest material that maybe it's not steel, it could be something, I don't know what it is, even that can get to the breaking point. And at the point where you get to the breaking point, then that becomes disorder, becomes an illness, isn't it? And therefore, our business then is to continuously understand ourselves. What are we made of? Are we glass? Are we steel? And that we may not change because it's already been defined by several things. But then, do we know the pressures, the weights, and the pulls? What are those things that are pulling you and putting pressure on you that can get you to the breaking point to the extent that you will require help? And is there something we can do continuously? And part of my presentation will be that. What can we do? Because again, we don't want to repeat the science class. So it's good to know that stress is important. If I wasn't a bit stressed about what will happen to my children, I wouldn't have been creative enough to know that if I carry their tablet and something, they'll just be well entertained, isn't it? You need a little pressure to think, to be creative, even financially. If you don't have a little pressure, you won't be creative to start a business. So it's good to look at stress positively. We need a little stretching. We need a little push and pull to be creative and to exploit our potential. But we need to always look out when it's getting out of control. Muhimu sana, si ndio? One other important thing is, if you look at the World Health Organization, many people are affected. Actually, they say 1 in 4 people are actually affected. So if we are 100, or we are meant to be around 100, it means 25 of us are actually affected. But the worst thing about mental illness is that it's not accepted, it's not acknowledged. People have various explanations of why people go through this. And the worst thing about that is then many people continue to suffer. And if you look at, again, figures and facts, 3/4 of the people who struggle with mental illness have not accessed the care that they needed to receive. Why? Either because they don't know, but we are happy that we are sitting here and sitting in all the other forums that help us increase our awareness of mental illness, but also the result of stigma. This is the truth. I have seen people who have really severe depression, for example, even young people, including college students, but the last thing they want is to be associated with mental health issues, and so they had rather not be seen, or if they have to be seen, they want you to see them either under a tree. You know, if you, I told Dr. Moteti I have an issue with my bone, I'd confidently walk to a hospital and there's no problem, isn't it? And I'd even confidently say, nimetoka, room, sijui 3 ngapi huko, natoa watoto kumuona. But sadly, for mental health issues, despite many of us being affected, it is not acknowledged as part of normal illness, and people are afraid, especially because even the society does not understand. And we need to be part of the society that acknowledges that God has given us many parts of the body, including the brain, and the brain can malfunction. And if it did, in terms of changes in mood, changes in the way we perceive things, it's okay to seek mental health care. And it's okay to seek this care early. And even when you interact with a relative or a friend who has such illness, then you're not going to separate them. You're going to treat them like you treat someone who was bleeding or someone who had pain. And we need to normalize accepting that there's a kind of pain that people experience that's not physical, and that too needs attention. So very, very important. And I know you know this because we have many explanations, and as far as the children of God, because I believe one of the things we have in common here is that we are believers. We have also seen that our own believing even becoming part of the hindrance of being people seeking help, especially because, as a matter of fact, if God forbid, I tripped there and broke my leg, you guys will pray for me, fact, because you're believers. But you will also make sure Dr. Moteti comes on time, or another doctor comes on time to take care of me, isn't it? Why is it that when people have mental health issues, we only want to pray? And we want to say, the same way we seek help for high sugars, hypertension, the same way we should encourage people beyond praying. Because we have seen, especially for believers, even just believing that it's demons or it's stress that can just be prayed for has been a hindrance. So we need to normalize, and we need to pray, but also normalize referring people to care. So very, very important. And there are many types of mental disorders. Again, this is not a psychiatric class, but it's good that we appraise ourselves with what are these disorders we're talking about. Keep reminding ourselves. I know all of us are familiar with psychosis, and we acknowledge that I'm very disorganized. But if we remember that classmate of yours, or even yourself, the fact that you've been feeling very sad, the fact that you've been feeling you have no energy to go to class, the fact that you feel very anxious, and when you're called upon to give answers because you have anxiety disorder, you know that that's also illness, and people need to seek help. So we need to keep reminding ourselves that there are many types of mental illness, because sometimes we only focus on psychosis or bipolar, the obvious ones, the more severe disorders. But the truth is, there are people who have been totally impaired by something like OCD, for example. I remember seeing a student who unfortunately could not graduate from college because they were so obsessed with the issue of germs that they'd sit in class, and unfortunately, as the nature would have it, they have a call of nature. And when they go to the bathroom, their head is so convinced, everything is so dirty. They spend the next 2 hours trying to clean, and they'll be carrying jig. Before COVID happened, they'll be carrying jig to try and clean themselves. And of course, what happens to the class where they were 2 hours ago? It is over, isn't it? When they begin to wash their clothes, they believe it's so dirty, they'll wash until 3 a.m. What happens to waking up to class? So they actually could not complete university. So it looks like something small, but something like obsessive compulsive disorder, their obsessions with either arrangement. There are people who are so obsessed with checking that they will waste the whole day, go back. They get to the road and they realize, oh my goodness, did I leave the iron box on? And they come back. It looks like something small, and it's easy for you to tell them, are you shida yako ni nini? But the truth is they're struggling. So we need to remind ourselves there are many, it's a whole spectrum of different disorders, and you can continue reading because it is not possible at all to discuss that in the next few minutes. But you keep reading, and especially familiarize yourself with the more common ones, the ones that we are likely to see. And a colleague of yours tells you, I feel very sad, I feel hopeless, I don't see the reason why I should come to class. Then they could actually be depressed. Don't tell them, man up. Kwa shida yako ni nini? Na wewe hata uko na pocket money. Na mimi mwenye sina pocket money nifanye nini? You know that's what we do, isn't it? It's good to know that even when people have been given everything, they can be depressed because there are so many other factors that could contribute to something like depression, isn't it? And we've seen people finally killing themselves. I hope you know that most of the people who attempt to kill themselves have a mental health issue. And one of the reasons why people kill themselves is because nobody understands. You try to talk to somebody that you say shida yako ni nini? Unasikia tu unataka kulialia aje kama mtoto. Kwanza it's worse for the boy child. And that's why we have seen that men tend to kill themselves more. Because for the girl, if I said I feel like crying, someone will produce some tissue, isn't it? But what happens to the boy child? You are shocking people. Like, why do you feel like crying kama mama, kama mtoto, and you want to tell the boy child today? Because depression affects human beings like you and me. It's okay to feel sad, and help is available. But you don't seek it from the wrong places. Don't go telling people on Facebook that you've been feeling sad, because the responses you are likely to get there will probably escort you to the grave faster. I'm sure you've seen that, isn't it? Especially at level like tunasikia uko chini, you are even new medicine, na campus to do it. You know, those are the responses, isn't it? And before you know, a guy now finally realizes that there's no hope. So we want to say it's okay to feel sad. Depression happens to real human beings, just like all other illnesses, but seek help in the right places. People who understand. And the bipolar mood disorder, again, when you don't have someone who is extremely excited sometimes, or you're feeling that way yourself, and then sometimes you feel super down, it's possible that you could actually have a bipolar spectrum disorder, and it's okay to go and have a consultation so that it doesn't affect you. The sad thing is, especially because most of the people tend to start with what we call bipolar 2. You know, bipolar 2 is the milder form. So you feel a bit excited on top of the world, then at times you have what we call dysthymia. You feel down but not too down. The sad thing is, we wait until now you have proper manic episode where you are extremely irritable, where your excitement is either too high, and then now at that time you even start developing severe symptoms and you have to be brought to hospital. So it's very important to keep listening to what you're feeling, to keep observing, especially to close to loved ones, before useme huyu ni kisirani. Kana alikuwa na haki la mtu, haongeleshe mtu. Could it be that they have high and low moods? And could it be that they need help before it's too late? So very, very important to check that out. I find that psychotic disorders are the easier ones, people who hear voices, but it's also good to note the people who are locking themselves, or you feel like you are afraid to go out, you feel like people are following you, you can hear footsteps, simple things like that. We notice the obvious ones, the ones who are wearing 20 clothes, but there are very many people who have psychotic symptoms, but they don't realize, because all they do is that they are afraid. They feel like something is happening, but they can't explain what, so they start isolating themselves. So such things could actually be indicators that you could be unwell. And the earlier the treatment, the better, sadly, especially for the people who we say have what we call negative symptoms of schizophrenia or psychosis, the ones who are not able to relate with people, they don't talk to themselves per se, they not even hear voices initially, but they have difficulties relating with people, they have difficulties initiating activities, and they always feel like people are following them, so they lock themselves. Those are missed, and the longer the duration of untreated psychosis, the more difficult. So we need to be aware of these things. And the alcohol and drug use, and again, and I have many young people coming and saying, I am not mental. Why am I in Ward 11? But this is the truth. When you start taking alcohol and drugs, it is bad manners. It is tabia mbaya, and people can pray for you. But unfortunately, when you get to the point where the chemistry of the brain changes, it's an illness. And because I'm talking to young people, this should be the message. Prevention is better than cure. Because nobody started taking alcohol to get addicted. think that's the most important and simple message. And the most, if you come to a rehabilitation unit and interact with the people who are there, I can tell you, it's a struggle. Sometimes I'd rather a bipolar patient tied in ropes than addiction. It's very, very difficult, especially because it changes. The chemicals in the brain, the withdrawals are very uncomfortable. People really struggle. And we've seen people killing themselves finally because they can't. They are unable. So, because I believe you haven't started, just run away from it because it's difficult, whatever it is. And anxiety disorders, again, as much as they're not very impairing to many people, there are people who you've seen, they look shy, but the point is they feel like collapsing. Every time maybe they face people, those who have social anxiety, isn't it? And that's they're worried about everything, even just traveling. Don't dismiss such a person. Don't dismiss yourself because help is available when you're continuously worried. We said a bit of worry is okay. When I was coming, I should have been worried, what will happen to my children? Will they even calm down so that I can present what is going to happen? That's normal, isn't it? But when it's impaired, when you're continuously worried and you always feel like things will go wrong and it incapacitates you, prevents you from making decisions, it could be disease and there is hope for it. Of course, PTSD, and this is what we always say, for people who've been traumatized, 75% will just be fine. We are not resilient, the way God created us. But 25% of the people, when you go through a near-death experience, whether it's a car crash, even violence of some sort, even people who've been attacked even on the streets by thugs, it's possible that you can actually be affected. So don't feel weak, don't feel bad. It's because you're human and you happen to be in the 25% that can actually be affected. And you find that every time such news happen or anything that reminds you, you feel completely paralyzed, you keep experiencing it once again, it's important to know you could actually be going through post-traumatic stress disorder and help is available. And one other thing to note, previously PTSD was thought to be of people only who experienced the accident or the traumatic event. But it's good to know if you learn that your mother or your brother has actually gone through a very traumatic event and maybe they died, that too can actually result in PTSD. You know, that is also assumed, because you have not been in an accident, but learning of sudden death, especially sudden traumatic death of a loved one, increases the risk of PTSD also. And if you're struggling and you keep feeling like many months later, you feel like you're receiving the news now. You know that's what we call re-experiencing, isn't it? Help is available, you could actually be struggling. Suicide, of course, we have seen a lot of people, including Christians, killing themselves. And you wonder why. We just say it's because they probably struggled. Probably less than 5% of the people who kill themselves actually didn't have a mental illness. More of the impulsive type of people. You know who say, naenda kujua, ama naenda kuvunja glass. But most of the others, they have struggled with something. Depression, substance use, severe anxiety, even obsessive compulsive disorder, those things that have impaired you. And you can't get a job because you have to keep checking, you always get paid. So they look simple, but they can actually result to one wanting to kill themselves. So we need to be people who are preventing suicide by being aware about ourselves and about other people. Very, very important. What causes mental illness? We don't know. That's the correct answer. Just like we don't know what causes diabetes, hypertension. They are all chronic and communicable diseases, isn't it? So that we don't know doesn't make it very different from all the other things. What we know is that there are many risk factors. It's nature-nurture interaction, biopsychosocial factors, many of them from genetics, from any illness that affected the brain when you're growing up, from life just happening, and happening in a way that's difficult. You lose a parent, you have no school fees and you're continuing to struggle. All those things, you get into a relationship that's not working. So we need to know that because there are many risk factors, then we need to look out for them along our life so that we can keep as much as possible, do something to make sure we are minimizing the chances. Of course, we are not 100% in charge. Even for families who are at risk of diabetes, you may do everything but still get diabetes. So it's true that you could still get it, but the question is, are you aware and are you able to continue doing something to prevent mental illness? And of course, we have the current issues that are happening, and we are all familiar with, especially the social media. People are asking, has there been an increase in mental health issues? The fact is, we never did a baseline survey. So as a scientist, to say yes, it would be a lie, because what are you comparing with? But then there's so much that's happening. The social media, poverty, accidents, so many accidents, and now they are reported live. Even before we wait for 9 o'clock news, it will be on your phone, isn't it? And of course, there's the concept, I don't know whether to call it the Kenyan dream, of being like Chris Kirubi, I'm sure you know him, isn't it? You know, people talk about chasing the American dream, but then there's a chasing the Kenyan dream, where you must own a plan, you become important, because we've seen how we respect and value people who are rich. Hata saa hiyo ukijaribu, I'm sure umeona watu huko kwenu wenye hana pesa wakajaribu atakuwa MCA. No one recognizes them, isn't it? And so we are made to believe that for you to be respectable, you must have some money or you must be somebody. And so we are chasing and working towards being appreciated. Unfortunately, all these are contributing to mental health issues, and we need to be aware, we need to do whatever it is that we can do to protect ourselves. What is the hope for mental health issues? Treatment is available. And I know people say, but these patients don't recover fully. It's also true that even hypertension and diabetes, they don't recover fully. But stigma has made us to look at the fact that mental illness for some patients then the symptoms don't resolve completely, we give up. But we don't give up on diabetes, despite some people giving even on 4 regimens. So we must not give up on mental illness, and we must continuously try to do something to give hope. And time inaendelea kuisha. Ni stop saa ngapi? How many more minutes can I be given? 10. I have 10 minutes. So I think for me this makes the most important but short discussion, just reminding ourselves that this is true until we get to heaven. And I believe all of us hope to get to heaven, walking on the streets of gold. And we won't be sleeping, we are told, isn't it? Ila kutakuwa mchana na siku, we are on earth sahi. And we must remind ourselves continuously that it's your business to take care of your mental illness. You may not control the fact that your mother left you. You may not control the fact that your parents have conflicts. You may not control that right now the jobs are not guaranteed. It's not we are not in charge of that, isn't it? But we must build continuously the ability to cope with the stresses of life that will definitely be there. We said, kama huna stress, you're already in heaven. Tunatamani kukujoin hata sisi, si ndio? Whatever it is that we have, everybody will go through some challenges. The most important question is whether you go through the challenges, is whether you can navigate the challenges, isn't it? So then how do we do that? And the first important point is self-awareness. Do you know what you're going through now? Do you know what the challenge is? Can you articulate them? My friend patients who tell me, niko na mawazo mengi, na niko na vitu mingi sana kwa kichwa. And that's true of many of us. But we need to get to a point we actually write down how mawazo ni ya nini. Unafeel aje? Na feel tu vibaya. Vibaya aje? Then another word you can use to describe your feelings. Very, very important, isn't it? We all must expand our vocabulary. I feel tired. I feel frustrated. I feel disappointed. I feel angry. Because then when you're specific about what you feel and why you feel how you feel, then you're able to get a specific solution, isn't it? Because hata mimi ukiniambia uko na vitu mingi kwa kichwa, mawazo mengi, nitakusaidia aje kweli? Itakuwa ngumu, si ndio? So let's expand our vocabulary. Let's listen to ourselves, how we feel. The same way we look at ourselves in the mirror, let's normalize looking at our emotions and just making sure that you can, unajua ukiangalia nywele imekaa kando, unaitengeneza. It's the same way, but you can't correct anything unless you understand it, isn't it? You need to have seen that the collar imekunjana for you to correct it. How will you emotionally if you can't even define what you're feeling? So self-awareness is the first thing. The next other important thing is self-care, basics. And especially, I know that maybe right now, for students, I don't know whether this happens, but you can be so busy reading, you have no time to eat. I know it's true for us, they're qualified, and even myself, I'm a student of self-care continuously. I am continuously improving. There is so much to be done. Even sometimes you think that when you're in school, that's when you have no time. Utashutuka. When you come here, you almost wish you are a student again. At least it was a bit organized, yeah? So, this is the truth. You must learn to recognize that even you are important, especially for healthcare workers. We're always taking care of people. Who takes care of us? Take care of yourself. Sleep well, eat well, exercise, and do no harm through things that hurt you, like alcohol, caffeine, and all the other things. So social support Who is your friend? If anything happened to you today, is there someone you can call? Is there someone who will have your back? And social support is not social media involvement. It's not how many likes you have had on social media. And that's not your social support system. Social support system is real people who your interest at heart, they understand you, they want to support you. Especially for boy children. Who is the support system? You know, mnaambiwa mkujikaze tu kiume. But your kujikaza is what is causing the boy child to die, isn't it? Because then you're told you can't talk to someone. Normalize talking to a trusted friend. Don't talk to everyone. By the way, everyone doesn't care. But normalize talking to someone. It can be your classmate. It can be when you get out of here because you want to be students all the time. Your best man. It can be your big brother. It can be your father. But normalize sharing your problems with someone. Because when you don't, then they start overwhelming you, getting you to their breaking point, as Huxlow would put it. Problem solving. Again, a very important skill that we all need to have. So mashida utayapata. Fact. Na mashida tu si ya pesa. Mashida ya relationship. Mashida ya neighbor mwenye kuku zake zinakuja kukula mboga. Life. Wherever it is that you will have problems, isn't it? But what do you do with the problems? Do you sweep them under the carpet? And again, you continue reading. In these few minutes, we can't talk about all the problem solving skills. Do a root cause analysis. Why do I have a financial problem? Why do I have a relationship problem? Root cause to the root, isn't it? And then ask, what can I do? You know, when you do a root cause analysis, you do recommendation. What are you recommending for your current problems? I wish we had the whole day to talk about just root cause analysis and problem solving. How will you sort the problem option A, B, C, which one makes most sense? And follow through and do monitoring and evaluation. That we use in corporate world, but the truth is, even in working environment, but even in your life, are you monitoring whether the solution you propose is working, or do you need to go to B? Very important, isn't it? And always be open to, because one didn't work, I'm going to the next, not giving up all the same. So, anger management, again, this has caused a lot of challenges. I'm sure we are familiar, especially in relationships, when you're ditched and people have even hurt each other. And we need to always recognize that when there has been conflict, you also had a role to play. Say, I did what? I am unhappy because, and I am willing to do what? Don't always point to what people can do. It's always about I am unhappy about, and I would like what? That's what we're talking about in anger management. And if you can, don't act when you're in anger because it will be harmful, isn't it? Positive thinking. You are what you think. If you think you're useless, you feel useless, you behave like a useless person, people avoid useless people. Then you say people don't like you, but it's because of your thinking process, isn't it? Evidence-based thinking. I failed the biology exam. No, it's not biology, physiology. This one we are more specific, isn't it? I failed physics, then the physiology exam. It's not I am a failure, but you've been passing all this time. Surely if you're a failure, then you should have been failing everything, isn't it? I failed something specific, evidence-based thinking, and I am going to do what about it. Not I failed everything, I've never passed in everything, or a boy leaves you or a girl, and say no one likes you, what about your mother? What about your sisters? So everybody hates you. It's not a fact. Evidence-based thinking. Behavioral activation, naenda kumaliza. Changamuka. I like my sister in yellow. You see the way it's bright and beautiful, isn't it? That day unasikia uko chini, tafuta your yellow and orange thing of bibi nani. That is the day, you know when you're in yellow, you feel good about yourself, isn't it? Do you know your dressing always speaks about what you feel about yourself? Changamuka tafuta hiyo dress ya yellow ama red, na utokelezee. Na utarealize the river is still flowing, the sun is still shining, isn't it? Lakini ukikaa kwa room, most of the time, negative thoughts comes na watoto wao. And you feel hopeless and useless. Ndio, lakini ukichangamuka unakuja kuta huko nje, unasikiza stress ya dada, unasema wa acha tu kumbe mimi hata una repent. Nilikuwa nasema nini? I am sorry God for complaining, isn't it? So behavioral activation is cheering yourself, doing actively, not passively, actively doing something that will cheer you up, whatever it is. Hata kama ni kuona Arsenal. Arsenal ni depressional pole. Ni Chelsea. So in conclusion, what are we saying? We are saying, Manu, this is all senior. Whatever it is you do, and for girls, whatever it is, isn't it? But it should not be harmful. What are we saying? We are human beings, we have a brain, we are at risk, isn't it? And whatever it is that you do, if you're not mentally healthy, you're not okay, And many people are continuing to struggle, but we must be part of the solution, starting with us. And it's important to know it's okay not to be okay. But help is available. God bless you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Kwoba, for speaking to us and mentioning such wonderful things. I know we have learned a lot, and maybe there's something you have not understood, or something you'd like to be highlighted a bit better. You can ask as we prepare to go to the next section of questions. Tafadhali, if there's anyone who has a question for Daktari before she sits down, or before she sits. Those party pressure, she sits. Yes.
Just a quick question. So if someone is not feeling happy and they want to see a professional, who should they start with? With the psychological counselor, they come to the psychiatrist, who should they, besides their friends of course, but the professional, who are we supposed to see?
I think it's a very important question, especially, and people get confused. Whoever is accessible, let's start from there. Because both, if we practiced as we should, both should be able to handle it, in the sense that if you start with a counselor, a genuine counselor should be able to say, I have assessed you, I feel you're depressed, go to a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist should be able to say, well, I feel like you don't have, it's not severe enough. Oh yeah, thank you. It's not severe enough for you to require medication. I think the only problem with the Kenyan way, with the way we do things, is there's a lot of distrust between psychiatrists and counselors and psychologists, and we feel like if I refer you, then I will be stealing a patient from you, which is very unfortunate, but really, each of them should be able to help you. A counselor does psychotherapy, and there's role for psychotherapy. Remember we said it's biopsychosocial, isn't it? So a counselor should be able to say, you have depression, I take you through cognitive behavioral therapy, or interpersonal therapy. That's the problem, that if your problem is relationships. But a psychologist should also be able to confidently say, but on this one, you need medication, and I'm referring you to my colleague. So both of them, whoever is available to you, hoping that we can improve. We are really hoping that we can improve how we practice things so that no one feels disadvantaged. I've seen counselors, psychologists, and I know there are colleagues here who probably do medical psychologists who have kept patients too long until someone attempted suicide. But I've also seen psychiatrists who are attempting to give medication when it shouldn't have been given. So we really are hoping that we can do better.
Another question, Dr. Kwoba?
Thank you very much. Sorry for coming late. I decided to sit at the back. I'm not sure if I have a social anxiety. I'm not sure.
Free therapy is available.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure I'm coming to the right meeting, but now I'm confirming it was the right meeting. The first time I got involved in CMF, that was last year I think, it is because a topic like this one on mental health was going on via Zoom, and I just bumped into it accidentally, and I found it very interesting. And through that, I got involved in CMF, initially virtually, and finally, now physically. This is the hard copy of me. Thank you, Dr. Kwoba. The topic always finds a very, very soft spot in my heart and in my mind and in my body. Because it helps me revisit my own life, my own issues. And one of them is that even at my age, by then my birthday is next week, issues like stress are still there. The other thing I want to observe is that issues of mental health do affect people across board, across all social, economic strata. I think think a few years back, I think it's about 2 years ago or thereabout, a second year law student at Harvard, the son of a US senator, prominent US senator, committed suicide. And it was reported that he had been having depression for many years, at 25. Again, a few years back, I think I remember reading about a psychiatrist from South Africa who committed suicide. Very prominent psychiatrist. You know, the point I'm trying to bring out is between that kind of situation and all the way down, hapa kwa ground, hapa katikati, there are all kinds of situations. And it seems like many mental illness, for that matter, cuts across all those situations. My question was going to be on stress as a factor precipitating mental health, to a point where somebody like me or somebody like somebody else can now come to a psychiatrist. Are there indicators? We talked about self-awareness as a way of going about it. Are there indicators which I can use to help assess myself? For example, I know if I'm going through this and this and this, my stress level is likely to be within this limit. If I'm going through this or the other, then it's at least limit. We talked about Cook's law. It took me far back in time. Yeah. Before we get to that limit of elasticity, how can I know in my own cocoon, in my own environment, working environment, home environment, that with these factors that are happening in my life, stress is getting to a certain limit that needs perhaps to be addressed professionally? Thank you very much.
So I wish there was a measure, a clear one. You know, like weight. Some of us who are interested in our weight checking, and you can say I've increased by 2 kgs. Unfortunately, there's none. But for me, the most important indicator is change. We all have us, whatever we are defined, whether we talk too much, or we sleep too much, or we just eat. And a change from the usual that persists and impairs. That's simple. 3 things. So I have been sleeping long enough. The last 2 weeks I've not been sleeping well enough. The last 2 days I've not been sleeping. And it's persisting, it's continuing. And it's not because you're waiting for a big examination. So I think that the simplest way is it's changing. It's not what you're used to or someone else you know. That's not their normal. And then it's persisting. Of course we said there's no flat. Flat is also abnormal. But you expect that sometimes you sleep a little more on a Friday evening because tomorrow is Saturday. You know that kind of thing when you've been awake the whole time. But we're saying it is on a Tuesday, you should be tired but sleep didn't come. Or it's on a Monday, you should be fresh and sleep comes at 2 p.m. Or you've been enjoying a plate of omena and now for the 3rd time, you look at it and wonder why people eat those little things. All of a sudden, despite eating your favorite thing. You have been the person to go for see on Friday, and for the 3rd week, 4th week, you're wondering why must you go? You just want to chill, and you don't want to interact with people. So change is the first most important thing, and it's not just one-off, it's persisting. And it's affecting how you've done your business. So that's simple. And that's why we say you have to keep looking at yourself in the mirror. If you have acne like some of us develop, you wouldn't know that the pimples have come unless you checked, isn't it? So continuously checking, because how would you know unless you have checked, isn't it? Let's normalize checking. Those very basic things, eating, sleeping, relating, doing very basic business. You have always been the kind to just dress up and go out, and suddenly you are no longer interested in just looking nice, and you don't care what happens. Simple things, not the big things. By the time the big things have happened, it's a bit too late.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwoba. Let's give her another appreciation. Thank you very much. Have a seat.